Today, we're taking this out and putting a new one in. I mean, really, look at this. Come on, let's get going. Okay, so as soon as I bought the house, I knew that I wanted to get rid of that rusty sink because it was rusted out over here on the edge. Now, the countertop doesn't look bad, but we're gonna change it out later. We were gonna install this without a garbage disposal and then come back and put the garbage disposal in later for another video. But, well, there's something wrong with this sink and I'm gonna leave it the way it is for now, but I want y'all to tell me what it is. But the way that they've got this drain offset, I need to put in a garbage disposal to get it off center because the J-bend on the P-trap isn't wide enough to help me hit on a center outlet sink like this. So we're gonna go ahead, Square's running to grab a disposal right now. We're gonna go ahead and install a disposal on this, get everything put in, get it hooked up. Then what we'll do, well, we'll come in later and fix the problem. But do me a favor, as y'all see me go through this, when you see what the problem is, I want you to do me a favor, go down in the comments, leave me a comment telling me what you see is wrong. And then at the end, if I remember, I'll tell you what was really wrong. Anyway, let's get started doing this. I'm gonna get the sink over here, get it laid down, and start getting everything ready to put it together. Guys, remember, this video is sponsored by Ferguson. Now, we love working with Ferguson because when we need stuff like this, literally, we can get online and order everything we need and have it shipped to us, or we can call our sales rep. We teamed up with Ferguson because of the people that we work with each and every day. So Ferguson, thank you for working with us. Now, if you've got a hard towel or something, you may want to take a razor blade and slowly clean this off. I've got my Leatherman here. It's a softer surface, so I want to be really, really careful with it. And I have taken a razor blade on surfaces like this too. You just want to go a little slower and make sure you don't cut it, scar it, anything like that. Now, one thing I like to do is go ahead before I put anything together, drop the sink down in here just to make sure it's going to cover up everything. There are some that have wider flanges around them and things like that, but I'm setting this in here and really the only place that I can see a problem is there's a problem with the linoleum back here where it's cracked, but there's nothing I can do about that right now. It's far enough back. I don't think anybody will see it anyway, but like I said, we're gonna change this out. I just wanted to do this video, but we're laying it in to make sure that it fits the hole. It doesn't leave any gaps on either side, or you can't see any of the stains or anything like that. But really, this looks a whole lot better than what was in here. Now I'm gonna try to make it easy because I wanna go ahead and install everything out here that I can. That way, when it's time to put it in, I flip it over, I put the clips in, I lock this thing down, seal it off, and then just hook up my drain and my water lines. We want to do most of the work out here. That way we're not laying on our back trying to work up underneath to some tighter areas. So I'm going to go ahead and put the faucet on, put the disposal on, then we'll be ready to drop this thing in. Now if you look at this, there's already a rubber washer here. So when I put this in, I'm going to have a rubber washer against the bottom. Then I'm going to have the metal washer. That way, as I tighten this up and tighten these screws up, they've got something to push against and they're not busting that rubber washer. Look at your directions, make sure you're doing it the right way. Also think about where your handle's gonna be. Do you want it sticking out the front? Do you want it on the right? You're gonna make sure you get everything lined up just like you want it before it goes together. And once I get everything straight here and get ready to tighten this up, if you look, I've got 3 screws on this flange. I'm turning one towards the very back, that way I can get to these other 2 pretty easy. And I wanna make sure I've got a long screwdriver so I can get in here and tighten these up. So now that I've got it the way I want it, I'm reaching in and snug it up. Now one thing that I've noticed is I've been sliding things up and down it. There's a little rubber washer right here that is wired to this hose. I want to make sure that I get that in there. That way, whenever I put this together, it doesn't leak. So now I've got the flange turned where I can get to it really, really easy. And I just kind of grab it, make sure it doesn't turn. You ever see those faucets you go to turn it on, it moves a little bit? Man, I hate that. Okay, so now that rubber washer we talked about a while ago, so I'm gonna pull it up, get my nut up where I want it right there around the end, drop my washer down in there, make sure it goes all the way down in like it's supposed to. I'm gonna take this in here because that's where it goes together. Now I'll snug that up and be ready to go. Now the next thing we have to do is put on the weight that actually pulls this back down. That way it pulls on this handle. I'm not gonna put it dead center. I want it more on the side that rises. And then lock it down. That way, as people pull it out, the weight will pull it right back down. Now for the garbage disposal. These are a lot of fun. First, you wanna loosen up the flange and get the screws all the way down. Now the way they've got this is just like it goes together on the bottom. The paper goes up against the bottom of the sink, then the triangle ring, and then this. Then what you're gonna do is you're gonna slide it all up and hold it in position while you put this ring back on there. Because it's gonna lock down in that hole so that when you tighten it up, that ring is what keeps this from sliding off the bottom, and these screws are gonna tighten up against this flange. That way it doesn't leak. You want to make sure you get this down in here. Now I've got a lot of putty on here and I'm going to put some back in. But it's all going to squeeze out in a little bit anyway. So I'd rather have too much than not enough. I want to make sure I get a good joint in there where it's going to seal and it's never going to leak. And what I do is kind of pull it up, line everything up the way I want it, and then tighten these screws by hand. Just let them go down and touch that little triangle piece. Now I just want to snug it up so it doesn't move around really easy. I'm gonna slide it over and look inside. I'm one of these people, I want my letters and everything nice and neat and straight. So I'm gonna spin that around. Until I see it's nice and straight the way I want it. I'm also gonna make sure that it's down in the groove, it's not off to one side or the other. And this actually looks pretty good right there. So now that I've got the way I want it here, I can loosen this back up just a hair. I wanna turn this, but I don't wanna turn the drain on the inside because I've got it lined up just how I want it. Now you wanna tighten these evenly. That way it pushes out that putty on the inside, and you'll see that here in a moment. Once my screws start feeling good and snug, I'll make sure I can't move it. Everything's good. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and set the garbage disposal on it. Now, one thing to remember right here, if you've got a dishwasher you're hooking up, you need to knock out this knockout plug. And it's just literally, it's part of the body on the inside, but they've scored it so that it knocks out pretty easy. So I'm gonna go ahead and set this down right here, but we wanna knock that out before we install it, because if we don't, we hook up our dishwasher to it, it's not gonna drain anywhere. It's gonna hit up against a dead end, and then you're gonna have problems down there with it flooding. So let's go ahead and knock this out and we'll be ready to go. Yeah, my little hammer works. So I'm good, everything looks good in there. Already got the pigtail mounted on there. So with this new ring locking in the way it does, and me knowing where I want it, you've got to look at how it's going to line up. So I need mine to come out over on this side. I can bring it out this way. So what I'm going to do, stick it in right there. Get everything locked in. And bring it in. Now that brings it out towards the rear. I'm good with that, I can make that work. Put a screwdriver or something in, turn it, make sure it's completely locked in. I always look at it all the way around, make sure every one of my clips are up under the edge. That way I know it's gonna hold, I'm not gonna have any problems. Now I can go ahead and put my drain outlet on here and I'm ready to go. All right, so you wanna take this rubber gasket first and stick it down inside the disposal there. Now it's thick enough that when this ring, you tighten it down, it's gonna pull the face of this drain right up to it. That way you're not gonna have any problems and it's gonna hold, it's not gonna leak. All right, so now once we flip this over and drop this down in there, I've got to hook up my hot and cold water right here, hook up my drain here, plug this in, then hook up my dishwasher. Put the clamp on there, that way it doesn't blow off. So let's flip this over, put this in, lock the sink down, and get this thing hooked up. Now these are your sink clips. I want you to look at how they go together. What you're trying to do, you're trying to get this to hook up to the top, slide up in there, and then as it tightens, it pulls this up, that way it pulls the sink down. So you stick them together like this, and they've got reverse threads so that when you're tightening them up from the bottom, it's pulling it down. Now these here will go in that groove on the sink, and you want to try and put a couple on each side and then 2 or 3 across the front and back since they're wider. But what it's going to do is as you tighten this down, the way it pulls that down, it's going to grab that sink and pull it down. And this side over here is going to clip in up under the countertop. So let's get these put together and then we'll climb down there and put some in. Now, if you're a plumber, do you put a bead of caulk on the counter before you set the sink down, or do you wait and come back? This has just got a little bitty edge, so I'm going to wait and do it when I come back. Now, one thing I am looking at, this front corner here is already kind of bent up. Now, I don't know if it's because of the sink or what it is. Everything else looks like it's setting down okay. But what I need to do is I need to tap this down. So I'm going to take a screwdriver and just tap it a little bit. That's all it took. So it pulled all the way down, so everything here looks pretty good now. All right, so I've got everything the way I want it. I'm gonna climb up under there with my screwdriver, slide some of these in and tighten it down. That way it doesn't go anywhere. So what I'm having to do here is I've got the sink pushed all the way to the back so I can turn these clips in the front to where they'll catch up under this countertop. Then what I'm gonna do is slide it forward and climb under here and snug these up. And what I'm doing right here is just trying to feel it. I've got my clip right where I want it. I'm tightening that screw with my fingers because there's no resistance on it. And I'm trying to get it pull up against that wood, that way it doesn't move as I tighten it up with the screwdriver. All right, so I'm gonna have to put an adapter on. The hoses aren't long enough to come all the way down to the angle stop. So we've got 1/2 inch iron pipe thread size, male, by 3/8 inch compression. So we're gonna go ahead and screw it in here, and I'm not putting Teflon tape on here because this has got a washer in it. It's made to go up in here and seal off like it would on the bottom of a faucet. So we'll put that together and snug it up, do the same thing on the cold. Now we can hook the water lines up to this. So if I get these water lines put together, I want to make sure that they're going to stay out of the way of the handle coming up here. So I'm just kind of getting a look under here as to how everything's going to lay in the back. So right now my water lines are hooked up. And that works very well. Push that way to pull it down just a little firmer, like that. But we'll play with it here in a moment. All I've got to do now is hook up my drain pipe. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and put my trap together. Put that in here and get a look at it because I see how deep it goes back in here. I can just swing it like that and make that work. I could cut it off shorter, but that put my 90 right up against it. I'd rather get a good joint back here. I'm gonna push this in. I'm changing this one out just because I know it's got that plastic washer. Get that lined up right there, and I'm gonna need an extension piece. So So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna measure from the bottom of this and go down to the bottom where I want it to bottom out, right there. So it's got about 4.5 inches. I'm gonna cut it 4. That way I've got just a little bit of room at the bottom. So literally I'm going from right here to right down here. So I'm gonna mark it with my thumb. 4 inches, and I wanna check it one more time. And that should be perfect. Now, just like I did earlier, I've got the rubber beveled washer. Gonna slide up there. Got another one right here that I'm gonna slide up onto the drain on the disposal. Put that one together. Slide it up there. Line everything up here, that way it lines up perfectly. Once you get it like that, put it all together and tighten it up. Okay, so now all our drains are hooked up, all the waters are hooked up. All I've got to do, reach up here up top, plug in my garbage disposal, and then we can test it and see how it works. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the plug in here. Make sure that this is turned off. I see hot to the back, cold to the front. Make sure everything looks nice and neat and straight. So it's turned off here. I'm gonna reach down and crack these 2 water lines open. All right, so I'm looking at the connections I've made and I don't see anything dripping here. I'm doing good. Now, anytime I change out a faucet, I wanna go ahead and remove this aerator. Just because you don't know if there's any trash that got in the line. So now when I turn it on, see all that black stuff? I didn't want that to end up in my aerator. Now I'm looking around under here again. Do I have any leaks around the garbage disposal? And you can look up underneath. Everything under here looks really, really good. I'm checking back at my water connections again. Don't see any problem at all. Run hot side. Run cold side. Everything feels really, really good. So to be honest, this is pretty much a done deal. Now, what I like to do is go ahead and fill up my sink, get as much water in as I can, pull the plug. Now I can check my drain piping to see if there's any leaks there. Now, if I knew we weren't gonna change this out anytime soon, I'd go ahead and run a bead of caulk around it, especially since I didn't put a bead under the edge whenever I set it. Some plumbers do it under the edge, some don't. I like just running a thin bead of caulk right here. And the way this feels back here, I may go ahead and run some around it because, to be honest, once we pull this sink out, we can clean that off pretty easy. Then when we change out the countertops, we can put this one back in if this is the sink that we want to use. Guys, remember, this video is sponsored by Ferguson. Now, we teamed up with Ferguson not just because of them being a plumbing supply company, but being a plumbing supply company that takes care of the plumbers, the plumbing company owners, and the communities that they serve. It's neat that I'm out traveling around as much as I do, and I see Ferguson trucks everywhere. It's really pretty cool to see everything they do for the communities that they're in. Anyway, go check out Ferguson.com, and if you haven't joined their Facebook group, jump over there and do so. Maybe I'll see you in there. All right, this is a big sink. I've got a lot of water in it. I'm gonna go ahead and pull the drain. Check everything below the cabinet just to make sure everything's okay. Then pretty much, we're good to go. Guaranteed not to leak, seek, rip, drip, bust, rust, or run out the side. Houston, that's a wrap.